Be Rich, a movement of generosity led by three simple words: give, serve, love.
Be Rich, a campaign that brings people, causes, and opportunity together.
Together, over 120,000 people
united under the banner of generosity with one simple goal:
to make
a difference.
A difference.
A difference.
To make a difference.
A difference, an impact, a change, a release of hope, joy, and light in our cities and around the globe. A difference for our friends, our neighbors, and those we will never meet.
A difference that can spark generational impact.
And making that difference is simple.
Simple.
Simple?
Simple.
Simple.
Simple. In a complicated world, can making a difference really be simple?
During Be Rich, it is.
Because of you.
You want to make a difference, an immediate and tangible difference around you.
And as you are right now, you have all you need to do it.
Because you are here. We are here. And together, we're about to unleash a wave of generosity around the world led by three simple words: give, serve, love.
Are you ready? Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Ready? Hey, Buckhead Church, you ready? Yeah, Gwinnett Church, you ready? Brownsbridge Church, you ready? Decatur City Church, you guys ready? Woodstock City Church, you ready? All the South Side churches, are you guys ready down there? Lake Oconee Church, are you ready? How about this, Sweet Home Alabama and Redstone, are you guys ready? You didn't know I was gonna mention you, but I know that you guys are ready. Hey, generally speaking, it is generally easier to know what to do than what to believe. And this isn't true in every realm of life, but in most realms of life, it's always easier to figure out what to do than what to believe. It's easier to figure out the right thing to do, oftentimes, than the right thing to believe. I grew up in a version of Christianity that was all about believing correctly. It almost didn't matter what you did because you could always get forgiven. But you better believe correctly. A lot hinged on just believing correctly. And you know this, if you went to school or you studied any kind of church history, or if you even know sort of at the macro level what happened in ancient history, not even ancient history, but even after that the church, once the church got started, the church actually went to war with itself over what to believe. I mean, the church argued over words. The church argued over peripheral things. And during the Reformation, tens of thousands of people died as religious, as Christian groups went to war with each other, and people were arrested and strangled, and all kinds of terrible things happened over the issue or the question of what is the right way, or specifically what is the right thing to believe. And belief is extremely important. But here's the kicker, and here's the surprise, and here's the thing that if you're not a church person or you haven't been to church in a long time, here's the thing that I would love for you to hear today. When you read the New Testament authors, when you read the authors of the New Testament, you discover that the core beliefs of Christianity are really quite simple. They're quite simple, they're memorable, and most importantly, they are actionable. There will always be some mystery around the periphery. There will always be interesting things to discuss and theological peculiarities that are kind of fun to dissect and decide we believe this and you believe that. But there is extraordinary clarity at the core. Outside of it, or in the region of Caesarea Philippi, Jesus is with his guys. We talk about this all the time. And he says to them, who do people say that I am? And Peter says, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus says, you're exactly right. I'm the Christ, the Son of the living God. And then he says this, Peter and all of you guys here, he said, I'm going to build a brand new movement around this one simple idea: my identity, who I claim to be, that he would later punctuate with his resurrection, that I am the Christ, the Son of the living God. And that is the core belief. In fact, Christians in every language, in every single world, if you were to gather Christians together, perhaps the only thing we have in common in terms of belief is that we believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. And then toward the end of his ministry, he said, now that I've firmly established with you who I am, here's what I want you to do. And he said, I'm going to give you a new commandment, not a list, just one. You are to love one another. That wasn't new, but he wasn't through. You are to love one another. I'm going to define it for you, he said. You are to love one another the way that I have loved you. And this was so core. This was so central. He said this. He said, by this kind of unique love, everyone will know that you are my disciple or my follower or my learner if you love one another. This is how we are to be characterized. This is how, as Jesus followers, are to be recognized. And the rest is just kind of detail. Because imagine a world, and I know I say this all the time, I'm going to keep saying it. Imagine a world where people, skeptical of what we believe, are envious of how well we treat each other and amazed at how well we treat them. Long before there were chapters and verses, long before there was the Bible, there was a version of our faith. There was a version of Christianity that captured the attention of the world because of how it behaved, not simply what it believed. A version of faith that did things. A version of faith that made people want it to be true before they were able to believe that it could actually be true. And John, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, the apostle of Jesus, John that watched Jesus from the day he stepped onto the pages of history at the Jordan River when the other John the Baptist, baptized him. John, who had a front row seat as an old man. All of his friends are dead. Perhaps the city of Jerusalem has been sacked and the temple burnt by this time. Peter is dead. The apostle Paul is dead. We don't know what happened to the other apostles by this time in history. He might have been the last man standing. John, who is the first person to put into print that we know of that God is love, a uniquely Christian idea. That same John writes to first century Christians. And here's what he says. And this may bother you a little bit, depending on what kind of church you were raised in or what kind of version of Christianity you were raised in. But if you're not a Christian or you used to be or you're no longer a Jesus follower, I hope you find this so intriguing you lean in and perhaps you'll be open to giving the message of Jesus a second chance. Here's what John, who knew Jesus, was. And for just a minute, if we could suspend our imagination, just suspend what we've known. I'm not reading from the Bible for just a moment. I'm reading from a letter written in the first century by an eyewitness to the events of Jesus, to men and women who were not eyewitnesses, but who had become followers of Jesus. And here's what John, the friend of Jesus, wrote to all of us. For this is the message you first century Christians heard from the beginning. In other words, the moment that you began to entertain the fact that maybe Jesus was the Son of God, he said at the very beginning of your faith journey, here's what you were told. We should love one another. He said, this is basic. This is 101. This is the very first thing you heard when you began your walk with Jesus. And then after illustrating it with a story from the Old Testament of Cain and Abel, he continues in verse 14 and he says this. He says, we know, we have certainty, we're confident that we have passed from death to life because, in other words, we have confidence that this is the real deal. We have confidence that something has happened on the inside of us. We have confidence that the Spirit of God lives on the inside of us. Why? Because the Bible tells us so. There wasn't a Bible yet. He didn't have one. He was writing one. He just didn't even know it, right? Because we believe the correct things, not according to John, who knew Jesus. Listen to what he says. We know that we have passed from death to life because we love each other. Anyone, look at this, anyone who does not love remains in death. Anyone who hates a brother or a sister is a murderer. And you know that no murderer has eternal life residing in them. And then he says this, and this is how we know what love is, because it's not just general love. He said, this is how we know this very unique brand of love is. This is how we know what love is. And then John says something that we miss because, again, the way we were brought up reading our Bibles, he says, look, this is how we know what love is. Something happened. Something happened. This is how we know what love looks like. We saw it. Something happened. And John would say, I was there and I saw it. This is how we know what this unique brand of love looks like. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us. And then here is what stands at the epicenter of the Christian faith. Here's what stands at the epicenter of all we say we believe and all we say we have embraced and all we say that we follow when it comes to following Jesus. He says, this is how we know what love is, that Jesus Christ laid down his life for us. And in light of that, here's what we ought to not believe. Here's what we ought to do. And he laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and our sisters. This is the central message of Christianity. In light of what God through Christ has done for us, we are to do for others. In light of what God through Christ has done for us, this is what we are to do for others. But when you read this, perhaps you think what his first century readers thought, but wait a minute, who are my brothers and who are my sisters? And certainly as you read the rest of John's letters, you understand that these are other believers, other followers of Jesus. But it's more than that. And Jesus made sure that John and his first century followers would know that it was more than that. Because when he told the story, when he told the parable of the Good Samaritan, he teased this out. Because you remember a lawyer came to Jesus and said, no, I'm supposed to love my neighbor. But, my neighbor are just other Jewish people, right? I mean, who is my neighbor? And in that moment, Jesus changed the world with an incredible story and an incredible punchline at the end of the story. He says, your neighbor is anyone who has a need you can meet. Your neighbor is anyone who has a need you can meet. Your neighbor is anyone, whether they're Jewish or not, or Gentile or not, or live in your neighborhood or not. A neighbor is anyone who has a need you can meet. Your brothers and sisters are those who have needs you can meet. And then Jesus would illustrate it at Calvary. For God so loved the world that he gave his son's life. So John, okay, we get all that. So short of dying for my brothers and sisters and short of dying for my neighbors and short of physically, literally laying down my life for my brothers and sisters or my neighbors or people who have needs, what exactly does this look like? To which John would say, I'm so glad you asked, but you may be sorry that you ask. If anyone, he doesn't define it narrowly, if anyone has material possessions, that would be us. If anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need, and what he says next is so graphic that our modern English translations have kind of cleaned it up and kind of dumbed it down for us. In fact, the New International Version that I use all the time, here's how it reads in our English Bible. It says, if anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need, but has no pity on them. But that's not what the Greek text reads. Here's what the Greek text reads. The Greek text says this, Klese ta spagna autu ap autu. Translated literally, shuts up the bowels of him from him. This little word klese, actually the verb kleno, you know what it means? It means to prevent, I know this is graphic, but this is John's point, so let's graphic. It means to prevent passage at an opening. To prevent passage at an opening. I want you to get the picture. To prevent passage at an opening. That's what this word means. So the King James translators back in 1611, they weren't polite. They just kind of went for it. So here's the King James translation of the Greek. This is what it looks like. But whoso hath his world's good, and seeth his brother have need, and shutteth up his bowels of compassion from him. Because that's what the Greek text reads. In other words, let me translate. Here's what John's saying to you, and here's what John's saying to me, and here's what John's saying to his first century readers. If you see someone in need, and you suddenly get financially constipated, you may be full of something. But it ain't the love of God, baby. If anybody, if anyone, you should read your Bibles. It's right there. If anyone has material possession and sees a brother or sister in need, but has no pity on them, here's the question. Here's the question I have to ask myself. Here's the question I hope we all ask ourselves. Here's the question that perhaps if we'd been answering this question correctly for generation after generation after generation, there wouldn't be so much resistance to the message of Jesus. If anyone has material possessions and sees a brother or sister in need, but has no pity on them, closes up on the inside, their heart shuts down, their compassion shuts down, how can the love of God be in that person? Now, here's why John uses such graphic language. Again, John, who wrote this, saw Jesus crucified. He saw literally the price that Jesus, and he put all this together afterwards with the apostles, he saw literally what Jesus paid, the price that Jesus paid for John's sin, for my sin, for your sin. This was not a story he heard. This was a piece of history he witnessed. So imagine that. Imagine you see your best friend, your rabbi, crucified. You'd hoped he was the Son of God. And then a few days later, you have breakfast with a crucified rabbi and friend on the beach, and you conclude he is who he claimed to be. He is, in fact, the Son of God. That he was right when he said that not even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but the Son of Man, the Son of God, came to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. And those gentlemen and those women who witnessed both his crucifixion and his resurrection, they understood. Who are we? How dare we ever shut our hearts, our minds, our compassion down in light of need, in light of all that God has done for us? He saw the price that Jesus paid for his sin. This was not a story, again, that he heard. John could not imagine a financially constipated Jesus follower. This was a contradiction in terms. In light of what God had done for him, in light of what God has done for me, in light of what God has done for all of us, how could we? If seeing a need we can meet, this is what John would say to me and to you. He would say, if seeing a need you can meet causes you to freeze up and to lock up and to close up, I think John would say to me and say to us, well, then you don't get it. You don't understand. It's become a fairy tale for you. It's become a storybook story for you. It's become something that's happened so far in distant past that it doesn't really connect with your life. But if you stood with me and with his mother and seen this, and then if it dawned on you the significance of what you'd seen and what God has done, that Jesus gave his life for that person in need. Jesus gave his life for the person in need, that has a need that I can meet or something that I can consider or something that I can respond to. And for me to close up on the inside, if Jesus gave his life for that person, certainly I can spare a few dollars, a few minutes, some of my extra. Surely if we understood this, surely if we had seen what John had seen, surely we would be happy to do for others what others can't in that moment do for themselves. Because that's the gospel. While I was still a sinner, Christ died for me. When I was helpless and dead in my trespasses and sin, God, through his Son, did something for me. And he says, now I want you to live a life that reflects that kind of generosity to the people around you. John would agree. We may not always know what to believe outside the core of our beliefs, but isn't it true? In light of what Christ did for us, we almost always know what to do. We almost always know what love requires of us. Now, to be clear, I've said this before. This is not about the golden rule. The golden rule is, I'll do for you what I want you to do for me. This isn't do for others what you want done for you. This is do for others in light of what's been done for you. Back to John's letter, he says this, dear children, let us not love with words or speech. In other words, he's saying, look, don't just sing about it and don't just preach about it, but with actions. This is amazing. But with action and in truth. And then he says, this isn't an add-on. This isn't extra credit. This isn't like the bonus application of Christianity. Listen to this. This is how we know. This is the part that may be new. This is the part that may be disruptive to your theology. This is how we know that we belong to the truth. This is how you know that you're in. This is how you know you're a child of God. This is how we know that we can set our hearts. We can set our hearts at rest in his presence. This is how we have assurance. Again, this may be new, but John says that the assurance of your salvation, the assurance of where you stand with your heavenly Father, is not a prayer that you prayed. And if you grew up in church like me, it's not a prayer that you prayed and then reprayed and reprayed and reprayed and reprayed. And every time there was a camp, and every time there was a revival, and every time somebody led that in prayer, I just kept praying that prayer just to make sure I was in, right? You just want to make sure, don't want to double check. John says, I don't know where you came up with that. That's not the assurance of where you stand with God. It's not a prayer that you prayed as a child. It's the life that you live. And it is the love that you do. Because as a Christian, as a modern Christian, even with all the tools and all the translations and all the commentaries and all the seminary trained people and all the scholarship and all the academics that's gone into bringing us these incredible tools and these incredible translations, as a Christian, we may not always know exactly what to believe, but we almost always know what love requires of us. And that's why we do Be Rich. Now, if you're new, here's the deal. Once a year, all of our churches from the Atlanta area and all of our churches from around the country come together and we do something corporately that we're doing all year long individually. We give and we serve and we love in Jesus' name. We give and we serve and we love out loud, because here's what we believe based on what Jesus taught. Everybody matters to God, whether God matters to them or not. For God so loved the world, the whole world, he gave his only son, knowing that very few people would know about it and very few people would respond to it. So we believe that everybody matters to God, whether the God matters to them or not. And we call this Be Rich, not because we think it's cute. This is something the Apostle Paul actually wrote to his protege, Timothy. He was a young man coming up that Paul would hoped it would one day take his place. And here's what Paul wrote to Timothy. He said, command those who are rich in this present world, and that's most of us. And we don't think we're rich because, we know people who are richer, but, our cars have their own little houses. So it's amazing, right? Okay. Command those who are rich in this present world to do good, and here's our phrase, and to be rich. He says, I want you to be rich. I want you to act the way you are. I want you to live out, and I want you to manifest what God has blessed you with, your extra and your running over, and the fact that you live where you live and you have what you have. And yes, there are always people who have more, but don't be blinded by that. He says, tell those people who are rich in this present world to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous, and to be willing to share. And here's the thing. I don't know you individually, but I would guess almost all of us, in fact, probably all of us want to make a difference with our stuff. None of us want to be selfish. None of us want to be characterized as selfish. We all want to make a difference, but sometimes we just don't know how. And Be Rich, as we said earlier on, Be Rich makes it simple. So if you're part of one of our network of churches that is doing Be Rich, this Be Rich season, at this time, I'm going to invite your fearless leader up to tell you what you are going to do to make a significant difference in your local community. So would you please welcome them to the stage at this time?
So here's the cool thing about Be Rich. We've been able to be a part of Be Rich for the last 7 years. It's part of our efforts to be Love in the Lake Country, to demonstrate the love of our Heavenly Father to Greensboro and Madison and Eatonton and Milledgeville. So we've been a part of Be Rich for 7 years. But as we lean in to be a part of Be Rich, here's who we get to be alongside. We're alongside 76 churches spread out over 19 states, represented in 6 different countries, and that includes 120,000 people like you who are sitting in the seats this morning. 120,000. And together, we are impacting 300 nonprofit partners spread out around the globe. That's what we're doing when we say we're going to be a part of Be Rich. Now, when we're a part of Be Rich, all that we give and serve and do happens within Georgia's Lake Country, and that money stays here and those efforts happen here. And we partner with nonprofits in our community because our goal is to partner with them, not compete with them, not try to reinvent the wheel on something that they're already doing in an extraordinary way. And so we partner with a variety of different nonprofits, and we try to find the very, very best all throughout our community. And some of those are nonprofits that step in times of crisis. And they step in when there's abuse. They step in when there's a shortage of food. And we partner with some of those nonprofits. But we also partner with nonprofits that are working with students, nonprofits that are working with families, and they're trying to help change the trajectory of that family as they cascade into future generations. We work with partners that are making a difference in all sorts of different ways in people's lives. Now, here's just some of the names that you'll probably recognize of some of the partners that we call our intersect partners, because we try to partner with them in different ways all year long. There's Atlas, that's one of our partners. There's the Madison Morgan County Boys and Girls Club, that's one of our partners. There's the Putnam Life Source Food Center, that's one of our partners as well. There's Greene County Food Pantry, Lake Oconee FCA, and I could keep going and going. Circle of Love Center is another one of our partners. So there's all sorts of partners that we have, and I haven't named them all, but these are partners that we've vetted, spent time with, and investigated. And so that's who we are aligning ourselves with during this time that we call Be Rich. But the question is, what is Be Rich? What is it all about? How do we make this happen? Well, Be Rich has three major components: give, serve, and love. And today, we're leaning in on the give components. So our staff has been asking, what can we do that would be a game changer for our nonprofits and life-changing for the people that they serve? And so today we have a goal. And our goal is that there would be 100% participation, that each of us would do something. And our commitment is that we will give 100% of that away to our partners that we've aligned ourselves with during this Be Rich season. 100% participation, and we won't keep a dime of it. We're going to give 100% of that away to these partners. Now you say, well, that's great, Andy. What would you recommend? Well, our recommendation has been the same since the beginning of Be Rich. There's been no inflation. There's been no increase. If each of us would simply do the very simple step of $39.95, we could make a difference. But really, together, we could make a huge impact together if each of us would venture in and do something. And $39.95 is a great place to aim for if you're wondering, what could I do, or how could I be a part of Be Rich? If you step back for just a second and think about John, the very close friend of Jesus. And John said that our faith is demonstrated and authenticated by our love for others. An extravagant generosity is the appropriate response. That extravagant generosity for others. It's a logical, appropriate response for God's extravagant generosity in His love towards us. And so this morning, we can step in and we can be a part of something very simple that makes a big, big difference as we're a part of Be Rich. So here's how that can work. This morning, you have the opportunity to give to Be Rich so that all of that money goes towards our nonprofit partners. And you've got two ways that you can give. The first is to give by credit card. And if you've got a card on you, that's what you want to do, you can get started with that in real time, because you simply need to text this number that they're going to put on the screen. You text 555-888. That's the number you send it to. And you send the word LO give, all one word. That's what you put in the text blank. And you hit send. And what you'll get back is a link. And there at that link, you can enter your credit card number, and it's all in one blank. You can enter your number, followed by your expiration date, followed by the security code, followed by your zip code. It all goes in that one blank. And then I think it cues you for your name, and then you hit send, and your amounts put in there. You can figure out what you want that to be, and you'll select Be Rich from the pull down so that all that comes in will go away to those nonprofit partners. Now, you can do that in real time while I'm talking right now, and many of you are already halfway there. So that's one way that you can give. Now, if you came with cash or check this morning and you want to give, in a minute we're going to dismiss, and you can go out into the foyer and you'll see the buckets out there, and there'll be a green balloon, and you can put cash or check into the buckets in the foyer near the kiosks, and you'll be able to give towards Be Rich in that way. But I would challenge you, be a part of this because all of it goes out to help our nonprofit partners in our community. And if you have any questions along the way or trouble with the app or anything like that, you can stop by the studio and they'll help you with any of the technical issues along the way. So our challenge is this morning for 100% of us to be a part of this. And our commitment is that we give 100% of it away. And this is our opportunity to be rich. This is our opportunity to demonstrate to our community that our faith is so much more than a set of songs and a sermon. And so, are you ready? So ready, set, go be rich.